All right, let's get started. So, welcome to today's webinar on rewriting fees. As you get settled, a few reminders. Please use the Q&A function for any questions today, and remember to be constructive in any of those questions or comments to the presenter and to one another to ensure that we have a session that is productive. AIA California will submit one AIA learning unit for those who complete this live session in full. And as always, the webinar content and additional resources will be available online soon. Today's webinar, which explores how you can think about your value and your fees, is brought to you by BQE. Again, it qualifies for one AIA learning unit, which for those watching live, AIA California will report for you. Now to quickly introduce our presenter. Stephen Burns, FAIA, is an architect, technologist, and business strategist who works directly with architecture and engineering firm owners to help them rethink how they price, position, and grow their practices. With decades of experience in both practice and consulting, Stephen has helped over 1,400 firms transition from commodity pricing to value-based approaches, typically seeing 15 to 25% improvements in project margins within the first year. His approach combines proven business strategy with a deep understanding of how architecture firms operate, creating practical frameworks that work in the real world of RFPs, client relationships, and competitive markets. So now on to today's presentation. It's always great to see you. Please take it away.
Okay, Rebecca, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Let me share my screen, replace current share, and boom. There you should go. So, okay, you could tell it's dark where I am. So I am fortunately stuck in Paris. What a place to be stuck. But happy to be with you today. Let me move that out of the way. That's doing there. But I want to start with a little truth. I think it's something hopefully that you're going to laugh at, because if you don't laugh at it, you're probably going to have no choice but to cry about this. But architecture is one of the few professions where you can win awards, maybe make your projects on the cover of some beautiful magazines. You can see one of your clients cry tears of joy at a ribbon cutting ceremony and still find yourself wondering how you're going to make payroll next Friday. Doctors don't seem to have this problem. Lawyers don't have that problem, but architects, we're special. We don't just create beautiful architecture. We have created a really strange business model. We're in a profession where the path to riches is so unusual that if an architect hits it big, they might get written up in the Wall Street Journal as a curiosity. And meanwhile, the rest of us are getting paid in our AIA awards, which unfortunately can't be deposited in the bank. And here's the really crazy part. The harder we work, the smarter we get, the more efficient we become, our fortunes don't actually change. For some of you, you might even make less money. So imagine trying to explain that business model to anybody outside of our industry. It's insane. So today, I'm going to suggest something, maybe it's equally insane, that you just stop doing what you have always done. We stop pretending that this fee formula that punishes efficiency, stop pretending it makes any sense at all. I want to show you a way you can flip the script so that being a better architect actually makes you more money. I know that's a radical idea. Lastly, I do know I have done this webinar a number of times at this point. A lot of you are going to shake your heads in disbelief. You're going to say, this can't be changed. It's just too embedded in our industry. And who are we to work against it? So I'm sure that you're out there thinking these things as I take you through here, but I want you to stay with me, because even if you're not going to be able to adopt the model that I'm suggesting, I believe you are all going to learn something here that will help transform the way you think about your proposals. I also added this slide this week because I think there's some books you ought to read. Uh, these will help you appreciate how firms can get better and faster and more refined, but their fees just don't rise. And sometimes, as I mentioned, they might even shrink. And the reason why it's happening is because we price by inputs. Inputs are our hours or maybe even construction costs. And efficiency reduces revenue. And our clients are trained to shop for an architect based on their price, not on trust. And often you won't even notice the difference until you zoom out and look at your profitability. I've done the benchmarking webinar last quarter, and whether you're looking at the benchmarking results from our sponsor today, BQE Software, or any of the four different benchmarking reports, one of course is from the AIA, you just will honestly know that our industry is one in which profits are not anything to write home about. And these are not personal failings, they're just symptoms of a system that just was not built to reward your creativity or your efficiency or leadership. So that's what we're going to unpack here today. Now, I usually run a poll question, but to save some time today, I've eliminated the poll question, so you're welcome on that one, but the results are always the same. Uh, Basically, what's happening is uh, people experience what I call the efficiency penalty. It's built right into the way most of you are pricing for your services. So this is the paradox. You're going to spend years mastering your craft. You refine your processes. You make better decisions faster as you become more mature in the industry. You're even helping your clients avoid costly mistakes. So, in almost any other industry, that's the kind of expertise and efficiency that would earn you more money. But under our traditional pricing models, which is hourly billing or fees that are based on construction costs, this actually means that you will earn less. So think about it. When you bill hourly, the faster you can solve a problem, the less money you would make. Efficiency shrinks your revenue. And we have been conditioned to think that that efficiency means, oh, we can now take on more work. And of course, that means you're going to need to fill that void with more work, which is in itself is going to be a problem or has always been a problem. And then whatever you do fill it with is really no different because you're billing out hourly, which has a fixed margin. And unless you're like an attorney that's billing out at $1,200 an hour, I promise you, your margin is negligible. When you price by the percentage of construction cost, your fee is now tied to how much money your client is going to spend. It's not tied to the value of your insights. So if you can save them money, you will be cutting your own fee. And again, some of you are figuring that you're going to make that up through your own internal efficiencies, but understand the incentives are not aligned between you and your client. So the result is that your expertise and your efficiency, the very things that should be most valuable, they end up being penalized. You're rewarded, on the other hand, for spending more time or for projects that cost more money, but not for being exceptional at what you do. And both of these models will train our clients to focus on our costs instead of their outcomes. They treat us like vendors, service professionals that they're going to shop. They don't treat us as trusted advisors. And that is why so many firms feel this constant fee pressure. Clients are expecting more for less, and our pricing models just encourage them just to think of us as these interchangeable vendors instead of strategic partners. So today we are going to challenge that. We are going to rewrite that relationship between your expertise and your compensation so you will become rewarded, not punished for being great at what you do. So here is what we need to fundamentally shift in our thinking. We don't sell our hours. We don't sell designs. We don't sell drawings. We sell four things: that are far more valuable. First is we sell insight. That is your ability to see possibilities that your clients cannot envision. And you can solve complex problems with elegant solutions. You look at a site and a program and a budget, and you see opportunities that your clients can't. That is not a commodity, that's an expertise. You're also selling judgment. This is professional expertise that minimizes risk and maximizes opportunity. And it does it through thousands of crucial decisions. Every project that we take on, it involves countless choices, materials, systems, layouts, details. Your judgment, built over years of experience, it guides your clients away from costly mistakes and toward successful outcomes. The third thing you sell is your confidence. You give the client the peace of mind knowing that their incredible investment and the outcomes that it's hopefully going to bring are going to be safe in your hands. And lastly, the most poetic part of this whole system is you're selling transformation. That is a future state that did not exist before. And it all depends on the kinds of projects you take on or your clients' goals, which we're really going to get into a little much deeper in a few minutes. That could be an improved quality of life, an enhanced return on their investment, some operational efficiency, maybe some kind of community impact. So you're not just designing buildings or what maybe we call architecture, you're designing these better futures. I am going to break a rule and tell you the secret to crossing the divide. It comes from telling stories. As Rebecca mentioned, I have engaged with over 1,400 firms, and I've actually visited countless thousands of your websites, and most of you don't tell stories. And a few of you who do are actually telling stories that your clients really can't hear. You have to tell stories that create the desire in them to take a voyage with you. And if we do have time later today, or maybe in the Q&A, we can get more into that topic. It's one of my favorite discussions with my own clients. So I am going to give you a couple of case studies today. This first is a real example. It is about this notion of what it is that you as architects are actually selling. So there's this healthcare firm, and they were competing to design this new outpatient surgery center, and most of proposals would focus on, the space planning and compliance issues, aesthetics, always a big one. It's the usual checklist of the things that we as architects believe our prospect, our future client, is really expecting to hear from us. These proposals talk about what we're going to deliver and when we're going to deliver them. But one of the teams started with a question. It was actually based on something that was written in the RFP, in the request for proposal. They asked the client back, what's actually limiting your ability to perform more daily procedures? So understand this is a healthcare facility that was understanding there's a market need out there for the services that they perform. And they they just didn't have the facilities that could enable them to churn as many of these patients through their facility each day. So they felt we need to build a new state-of-the-art facility, if you will, so we can really take on the market that is definitely out there. But by asking that question, it uncovered these bottlenecks in patient flow and especially in equipment turnover. So their proposal wasn't just about the designs, the architecture involved in creating a healthcare facility. It was about the operational efficiencies, how that this new project would allow them to perform more procedures each day, and even do it with the same number of rooms. They don't have to build a bigger facility. So the result was that their insights were translated into millions of dollars of added annual revenue for their client. And in fact, their proposal was so radical, it included an option to renovate the existing facility. It would have saved additional millions of dollars, but for reasons that were greater than just this one item here about the turnover, they really wanted to proceed with a new sort of state-of-the-art facility. So their proposal clearly demonstrated the kind of impact that their involvement had, and it outweighed their architectural fee. It positioned them as a term I've been using repeatedly here, a strategic partner, not just as a service provider. And that's actually the difference between selling designs or selling drawings or selling your services versus selling transformation. This firm didn't win because their designs were more beautiful. That's very subjective. And I think every firm, their proposals were equally beautiful. They didn't win because they had a lower fee. They won because they helped the client see the value of design as a business tool. So they positioned themselves as the strategic partner, not just some service provider. So that is how you do shift pricing. That's how you shift it from technical to strategic, not by doing more and charging less, but by asking better questions and solving more meaningful problems for your client. I think we have to just step back for a moment to see how is it we ended up in this horrible place we are today. So for most of the 20th century, architects priced their services. It was based on a percentage of the cost of construction. It was typically 6 to 10%. It was actually, back in the old days, it was codified in AIA documents. It was considered fair and professional. And that model worked pretty well, especially since the scope was predictable, the liability was low, and the clients respected the role of an architect. In the post-war decades, we saw the introduction of fixed fees or cost plus contracts, especially in government and institutional work. Those models offered predictability for the owners, but they really didn't reflect the effort that was required on the design side. So in the 1990s through the 2010s, things were shifting, scope expanded, risk was shifting to the architect, liability insurance was skyrocketing, and clients began treating design services like procurement, shopping a proposal and demanding detailed breakdowns. So in response, many firms moved to hourly billing and hybrid models, which were designed to help protect the firm. That meant billing by the hour for phases that were unpredictable and then capping your fees for other phases where you could really predict it. It was a defensive move. It made sense at the time, but it did have its consequences. The focus of proposals during this period moved from the value the architect brings to the client to the activities the architects perform. It changed from the outcomes to the inputs. It changed from leadership to just providing services. So that might bring us to more recent history. We have seen some examples of experiments with performance-based compensation. Very rare, very rare cases that do that. But the real opportunity, it lies in what is referred to as value-based pricing, where you charge your client for the results that your work creates rather than the time it takes to produce your drawings or provide these services. And frankly, with the rising complexity of our projects, the increased impact of our design decisions, the shift isn't really just possible, it's long overdue. And because you're even attending today's webinar, you know your fees are a problem. And changing more than 100 years of habit is not easy. But if you ever hope to earn the fees you deserve, you have to change the conversation. And one of the biggest misconceptions in our profession, and I hear it time and time again, is clients cannot grasp value-based pricing. Maybe many of you out there don't even know what I'm talking about. Then the truth is, your clients already understand it. They live with it, often many of them. In the legal industry, there are attorneys out there that work on a contingency basis. Their clients aren't asking in those cases for detailed timesheets and or estimates of all of their hours and their billing rates. They don't need a scope document that outlines every possible motion or phone call that's going to happen. They agree to pay because they trust that that lawyer is going to deliver the right results. Some of you may have had experience, as I have unfortunately had to, with an insurance adjuster. Homeowners don't really care how many hours are being spent by that adjuster reading their policy and on the phone negotiating with the carrier. They will happily pay a percentage of the increased claim because the outcome is all that matters. If you need surgery, you don't choose your doctor based on how quickly they're going to complete your heart surgery and what their hourly rate is. You want confidence that they will get the job done and they have the highest success rates. The point is this: the public absolutely understands value when it is framed around the results. The actual gap is not in their understanding, it is in your willingness to frame what we do as outcomes, not as activities. Just imagine that surgeon giving you an estimate based on their hours that they're going to take to get in there and get out of there and their billing rate. And then having you tell them, there's another surgeon who's given us this proposal. He has lower hourly rates, and we're hoping you can match that. That's not only embarrassing, it's actually humiliating. It happens to us every single day. So here is where the opportunity lies. If you can present your firm not like your competitors with a menu of services you perform, the drawings that you're going to create, and all the hours that you're going to have to invest in this project, but instead, as the strategic partner who reduces risk, accelerates the schedule, preserves reputations, generates revenue, the conversation you have with your prospect will change. You are no longer just one proposal among many. You're looked at as a trusted advisor, one that they're going to want on their team. That positioning opens the door to a very different set of fees than the historical ones that we have all been conditioned to accept. And it is available to any of you out there listening to me today that is willing to claim this space. As architects, we have grown so accustomed to selling our time, to create our designs and our deliverables that we forget that our clients are hiring us to solve problems, reduce risk, maybe create opportunity. That's value. And they are often far more ready to pay for it than I think you give them credit for. So let's just put that timeline quickly into perspective. The old fees that we once used were, a century ago. The scope was very simple. Our liability was low. Architects, look at the picture on the guy on the left here. We were treated as these revered experts. You'd come onto the construction site and people would scramble down to, talk to you about this because they knew you had the answers, right? And construction was, straightforward. Building codes were thinner then, and the old technologies were like pencils and vellum. So in that environment, tying your fees to construction cost, maybe that made sense. So, but if you fast forward today, our projects are infinitely more complex. Our liability is skyrocket. Design services have been commoditized, and our fee structures have just not kept pace with all these changes. So why do we still use them? We use them because, first of all, they're very easy to explain. Saying, our fee is 8, 10, 15% of the cost of construction, whatever you can get, that doesn't really require a deeper conversation about the value you bring. Second, these are fee structures that are familiar to our clients. They have been conditioned for decades to expect them, and your competitors all do this the same way, so they're really going to not question that. And lastly, and probably worst, is they are safe for us. And I will tell you that that safety is actually an illusion. it exposes us to scope creep, margin erosion, and fee pressure. So, in other words, these models actually persist not because they work for us, but because they're comfortable. And I'll promise you that that comfort is what's costing you. So, it is a core mindset shift. We can't keep pricing by our inputs, by our hours, or some percentages, when the real value that we deliver is the outcome. So we're going to shift from pricing inputs to pricing outcomes. I'm going to show you how we do that. Your fees should reflect the transformation you create, not the hours it's going to take you to make that happen. We're going to shift from tracking our time for billing purposes to tracking our time so we can learn. Time data helps us improve our efficiency. It also helps us with our pricing, but it should not define your value in your proposal. We're going to shift from selling our services to selling those transformations. Don't just say what you do, show what will be different when you're done. We're going to shift, this is a tough one for some of you, from one price that you end up negotiating to three options. Give your client or your prospect choices that put them in control, but you, by giving them these choices, will be shaping that conversation. And lastly, we're going to shift from a world where clients are shopping one architect from another to one where they choose you because you've positioned yourself as a trusted advisor. So this is not just about charging more money. It's actually about aligning your pricing model with the actual transformation that you are providing to your clients. So before you ever talk about the scope of the project, the deliverables, the timelines, you're going to have what I refer to as the value conversation. For some of you, this is going to sound like a warm up. It's just let's get to know each other. It's actually the core conversation. It is the foundation for everything that comes next. And there are three essential questions you need to help your client answer. And these questions aren't about what they want you to design. They're about what they're actually trying to accomplish. And these are not the same thing as architects. We think they are because this is what we actually have been trained to do, is create buildings, make great architecture. So what are these questions? First one is why? What is driving this project? What goals are your clients pursuing? Is it about growth or solving a problem or responding to some internal pressure? Next one is, what does value mean? How does your client, how will they define success? Is it revenue? Is it reputation? Occupancy rates? Speed to market? Team satisfaction? Stakeholder alignment? What does the return on their investment, which is considerable, your fees are a small piece of that, what does that mean to them? And number three, which is often very hard for architects to ask, which is why now? What is the urgency? What would happen if we wait 6 months? What is the cost of the delay or inaction? And many architects are afraid to ask that question because it might bring up, oh, you know what? We could put this off for a year. And then you've got you don't have a project for a year. So it's important you still ask this question, because when you have this conversation, you're not just qualifying the project for your own purposes. You're shaping how your client understands the problem, and you're positioning yourself as the partner who's going to help them solve that. I do want you to be aware, many clients have never been asked these kinds of questions. Most firms go straight into scope and deliverables, and they do that, unfortunately, after talking way too much about themselves and their qualifications and their team and showing beautiful images of past projects. So when you ask your client, why now, or what does success look like for you, you're definitely going to catch them off guard, but that is a good thing. That moment of pause, that is where trust starts to build. You're helping them think more clearly about their own priorities. You're demonstrating that you're not just here to design and get this thing built as a service provider. You're here to lead. Now, some of your prospects might say, look, no one else has asked us that. And that's your opening. You can say, well, that's because I'm not just here to design another project for our portfolio and undoubtedly win AIA awards. I'm here to help you succeed. This is not about manipulation. It's not a trick. It's about elevating the conversation to that place where value actually resides. And frankly, it also gets you to a place where you will be providing better services. So, how do you actually start pricing these outcomes instead of all those inputs that we've been doing for decades? It's going to begin with the value conversation, those three questions that you have to ask your prospect before you ever talk about that scope and the deliveries, the deliverables, and what a wonderful team you are, and showing them all your wonderful work. I'm going to give you now my second case study for today. It's a scenario I've used before. Maybe some of you have heard me talk about it. It illustrates exactly how different pricing mindsets play out in the real world. So, a private school in Northern California, which is really dealing with middle and high school students in a sort of a, um, what do they call it, a prep school, private prep school environment. They wanted to get into the early childhood education area. And they had put together, the school board had put together a budget of $4 million. They had a program on how many classrooms they would need and the multi-purpose area, the administrative spaces. And they researched these firms that they were going to invite. They did it internally. They found three firms. They contacted them. They provided them with their RFP, and they asked them all to submit proposals. I want you to see three approaches to solving this RFP. So Firm A submitted a proposal. It was for $275,000, and it was based on an hourly estimate. Their proposal outlined all the projected or estimated hours for each phase, how many hours for schematic design, design development, construction documents, and all the kinds of deliverables they were going to produce along the way. So the focus was on those deliverables, the activities that they would perform, and their estimated or their planned hours. And what they did is to give the client what they thought was ease of mind. They capped their fees at $275,000. So what a benefit. The client could sleep easy knowing that this is one budget item that was no longer up for grabs or an unknown or flexible. It was capped. So Firm B comes along. They priced their work at $300,000, and it was based on a flat 7.5% of the cost of construction. That approach was standard for similar project types in their region. Their proposal also included their bios of the team, examples of similar beautiful projects, as scope outline. Now, for both of these firms, they have been in the business long enough to know that these are both fair fees. Any competitor was going to be somewhere in this ballpark. Firm A calculated from the bottom up, and they were prepared to manage the project to give the client their building within $275,000. They clearly believed this was a winning formula, and as this school was likely to have future work for them, it was a good way for them to get their foot in the door. Now, Firm B had all deep experience in these kinds of projects. They'd also done a renovation project for the very same school, for the upper school's cafeteria. They did that a few years earlier. They considered themselves the front runner. So they felt comfortably positioned to ask for fees that were right in the center of the bullseye for, again, similar projects in their region. And there was no need for them to discount their services or cap their fee some special way because they had familiarity with the client, and that that prior project was successful. They really felt they were the shoe-in, frankly. And then comes along Firm C, and they managed the RFP differently. So before considering their own costs and calculating their fees, they asked those value questions. Why are you doing this project? Why are you doing it now? What does success look like 3 years from now when we look back on the creation of this new preschool? What happens if the building isn't ready by that start of the upcoming school year? And these are not superficial questions. They're really the value questions. And it was through that discovery, not written into the RFP, through that dialogue they had, that they learned that the issue wasn't just about square footages or building design. It was about timing, board confidence, and organizational momentum, which I'm going to get into again in a minute. So, with that insight, Firm C returned with a value based proposal, and they did not propose a single number. They offered three options, each tied to a level of strategic involvement from them. They had a basic compliance driven package, it was $300,000. They had a core services option for $420,000. Well, they knew it was going to be high, and it was designed to guarantee the deadline, manage stakeholder engagement, and mitigate risks. And then they had the outrageous premium option for $500,000. It included post occupancy support, assistance with capital campaign materials, it included communication strategies to help the school engage with the parents and promote the project to help with the fundraising and the whole school community. Their proposal never once mentioned their hours. It only talked about the kinds of outcomes that they could expect. Their project examples, which were of course included, they were not just pretty pictures that would give the prospect confidence in their design skills and abilities to deliver a completed building. Frankly, the client already knew all of the firms could do this. They did their own due diligence in finding these three firms to consider. So why just present back to them what they already knew or that didn't actually add value to their proposal? So instead of every project that was presented was actually a case study. And I talked earlier about telling stories. This is an example of what that kind of a thing is. One of these case studies told a story about how they kept this project on track during construction when fires and floods in the region, again, this is in Northern California, had created these crazy construction bottlenecks. And they had a project that went through all of that and they took it across successfully. Another told a story how they helped another school system navigate some pretty tough board politics and take that project across the finish line. And the last case study demonstrated how they ran a community engagement process that actually built trust and excitement for this project in a community that was not eager to see any kind of development. Every piece of their proposal reinforced one thing: they understood what the school cared about and they knew how to deliver it. So, yeah, even their middle tier fee was higher than the other two. They knew it would be, but they weren't just offering them designs and deliverables. They were offering well demonstrated expertise, leadership, and results. And of course, I'm giving you this case study because they got the job. And they got it not because they were cheaper or not because they even worked previously for the client. They never did. And they didn't get it because their designs were necessarily more beautiful. They won because they quickly demonstrated their position as a trusted advisor, not just some other professional services vendor. And when you are the trusted advisor, you don't just get chosen, you earn the right to set the terms. So, yeah, Firm C was more expensive to the school, but they demonstrated how they would reduce risk, how they're going to support leadership and enhance the school's reputation in front of the very difficult school board. Their price was not based on their inputs, it was based purely on their impact. By the way, they were awarded the most expensive contract because they leveraged their position as a trusted advisor, maintaining board confidence during a sensitive fundraising cycle. Remember, this is a new business enterprise for an existing school system that's been through some difficult momentum problems because of the pandemic. They were going to protect the institutional reputation in the eyes of the parents, and who are, of course, the donors and especially the trustees of the school. Missing that fall deadline was not just going to be something inconvenient, it was really going to put the school at a reputational risk. It was going to shake confidence in the school's leadership. It was going to slow a capital campaign. It was going to impact the school financial stability. So these were not architectural problems, they were business problems. And Firm C had the clarity and they had the confidence to make these problems central to their proposal. That is what value-based pricing enables. It allows you to price what your work actually makes possible instead of what it costs you to produce it. And I want to challenge the status quo here. I know some of you are thinking, like, hey, Steve, we are architects. We are hired to design buildings, not to talk about enrollment strategy or board politics or even risk management. I get that. That is a natural reaction, but I want to offer you a different perspective. Your clients aren't just hiring you to draw buildings. They're hiring you to help them make smart, high stakes decisions about what to build, when, and why, and how. If you disagree, I'm going to tell you that this is why our profession is constantly grumbling about our salaries, about our profits, and even about our relevance. You're just not reading the room. And what I'm suggesting is don't just offer architecture. They see the pictures of your beautiful buildings. You may have walked them through some of them during the interview process and seen them appreciate your work. I want you to offer them leadership. And the truth is, most of your clients aren't actually in the business of building buildings. That project that is so important to you, it's really just a means to an end. For them, that building is really just a tool. What they care about is what that building, that piece of architecture makes possible. Again, like the first one, more patients treated each day, more students enrolled, higher educational attainment, more credibility with our donors, more operational efficiency. It goes on and on. If you're working with single family homeowners or maybe residential developers, the building might represent a more meaningful day-to-day life for stronger family connections, more time spent together, a sense of sanctuary, or maybe a legacy that might last for generations. That's what you're actually designing. And if you don't ask the right questions, you will not uncover the value that matters to your client. And who better to guide them through these decisions than the one person or the one firm who has to understand how form and function and budget and timeline and public perception all intersect. I promise you, you are not stepping outside of your role as an architect when you ask strategic questions. You're actually stepping fully into it. So the only handcuffs here are the ones we put on ourselves. So the moment you stop treating yourself like a vendor and you start behaving like a partner, that is the moment the clients start to treat you that way. And then you're going to start to earn the fees you deserve. I know the AIA has scared us away from claiming to be a fiduciary. Fine, I am not going to be able to overcome that, but that is not a reason you can't act like one. Okay, so I talked about these three options instead of one price for your fees. This is not a gimmick. It's about giving your client control while you shape how they think about the decision that you're going to ask them to make. So this is how you structure it. First, there is that basic, the minimum engagement you would still be proud to deliver. So it covers all the essentials, it solves the core problem, it gets the job done. Then there's the enhanced version. That's the smart middle ground. It adds more strategic value, better collaboration, stronger support, improved outcomes. This, by the way, is usually that sweet spot where most of your clients or your prospects are going to land. And then, as we saw with this school a few moments ago, then there's the comprehensive option. It's the maximum value option. It's the money is no object version. It minimizes their effort, reduces their risk, and it positions you as a fully embedded partner. And here is the key. When you discuss these proposals, always start at the top. Start at that top tier, you anchor high, and then you scale down, but you do that with integrity. You don't cut scope to make options. You design each of these tiers around the outcomes that you will deliver at that level. Because when you do this, the conversation shifts. Clients stop asking, should we hire this firm over that firm? And they start asking, how much of this firm do we want to hire? So, next up is how do you present these options? Your proposal should be one page. It's not 10 pages with attachments and an appendix. It's not a letter that requires a lawyer to decode. It is one clear, powerful page. This is what's going to go on this page. The headline, your succinct understanding of your client's desired outcome. This is where you prove you get it. You're not talking about yourself. You're showing them that you understand what they're trying to achieve. Then you give them three options, clearly stated choices that focus on the outcomes, not just deliverables. I'm not saying you have to eliminate the deliverables. This is a short one pager. Let them see what the benefits they are going to receive at each tier and choose the level of impact they want from you. And then you have a defined scope. Enough detail just to set expectations and outline the responsibilities, but do not drown them in minutia or even give away your strategic thinking. It shows them that this is a structured proposal, but it is not a spec manual. Give them a clear next step, the call to action. How do they say yes? What's the next step forward? This eliminates hesitation. It keeps the momentum going. And here is the nuance. This one-page proposal, it is not meant to replace your full contract or your general conditions. It is not a legal instrument. This is a decision document. Its purpose is to help the client quickly understand the outcomes, what are the investment options, and what is their path forward. And once they can say yes to this one pager, you immediately follow it up with your formal agreement, whether that is an AIA contract or your master services agreement or your standard terms and conditions. Why does this matter? Because decision makers don't want to sign off on 10 pages of fine print before they're fully committed to you. This one pager makes the decision simple, it's high level, it's framed around value, it gets to the yes. Once you have the yes, the formal contract is really just that, it's a formality. The power in this is the clarity and the brevity it presents. Most proposals fail because they are too long, they are too complicated, and they are too focused on what you'll do rather than what will be different for the client. So I want you to shift the conversation. Talk about them, not you. Frame the outcomes, not your deliverables. And the one pager will earn you their commitment, and the contract will earn the signature. So this is not just me telling you. This is an approach that works because of behavioral psychology. It is not just a little pricing trick or a pricing strategy. There is this thing known as the anchoring effect. That's why I've asked you to present the high value comprehensive option first. It sets a high anchor for what is the perceived value, and it makes all of the other options much more reasonable by comparison. That middle tier will become the default. When you frame it effectively, most of your clients are going to naturally gravitate towards the middle option, which typically offers them an ideal balance of the value they're going to receive for their investment. And instead of negotiating a single price, which is the beginning of that slippery slope where our industry repeatedly undercuts our competitors in order to win the job, here, your clients are going to be empowered to choose the solution that best fits their needs and their budget. When you offer one price, clients will negotiate. When you offer three options, they're going to choose. That is the fundamental difference in the power dynamic. And the behavioral research on the compromise effect or the decoy effect, it shows the people will tend to favor the middle option when they are given three choices. It feels balanced and safe and justifiable. That is why tiered pricing strategies often position that sweet spot there, right there in the middle. And when you do this right, your task is going to be to move the client to that comprehensive option. And while that may not work for you, they may not find your arguments compelling enough. Like we just saw in the previous case study where they actually did choose the $500,000 option. This is still a very different approach than what I see time and time again, which is the race to the bottom. By the way, this is what actually happens when you present a value-based fee, and the client says, "This is all more than we budgeted." This is an inevitable conversation. Most of you will instinctively reach for a discount. But the real issue isn't always the price. It's actually the risk that your client is being asked to take here. When a client feels uncertain, they want to minimize their exposure. So instead of cutting your fee, never cut your fee. Reframe the engagement to reduce their perceived risk. So, what that might mean is starting with a phased engagement. So, maybe there's a discovery or a feasibility study before the full commitment is actually taken on. Um, Deliver some limited outputs that give the client this immediate value while you continue to build that relationship of trust that you're always earning from them. I'll talk about that in a slide in a moment. Um, or maybe if you need to, you can tie your fees to some performance milestones, although I see that less and less. So I'm going to give you an example. One of my firms that I work with proposed a $350,000 fee. I think it was like for a campus master plan. The client balked on that. So instead of dropping the fee, we restructured it. We said there's phase one. It's only $85,000. It's a discovery fee, it's a feasibility study. And then phase two was like $265,000. You're going to get the full plan if you choose to proceed with our feasibility study. That approach de-risked the decision. They got to test the firm's process, see the value being delivered to them right away, and of course, they moved forward with phase two at the full fee. The lesson is really simple. Never discount. De-risk instead. It preserves your value and your positioning as a trusted advisor. Now, I'm running late here, but I know a lot of you do build your fees based on the estimated time. I do want to be clear. Smart firms will always track time, but they do it not to build their clients. They track their time to learn about their business and to protect their profitability. And this is why it matters. First, it will improve your pricing accuracy. You're going to know how long projects actually take, which makes your future proposals more confident and precise. Secondly, it will reveal the profit centers within your firm, which project types or service types where your margins are best so that you can focus on the most valuable work. And lastly, it helps with scope management. When you start to see time creeping up beyond your plan, that's when you can spot it early, you can course correct before your profitability erodes. I guess it's not the last one. It also highlights opportunities for your own internal process optimization, places where your team might be able to work more efficiently. And here's the key insight. In a fixed fee world, efficiency equals profit. Every hour you save through better systems or your expertise, it should benefit you, not just your client. So here's a real world example. A firm I worked with discovered through careful time tracking that their permit expediting process had gotten like 40% more efficient over the years. And that was due to these better relationships that they had earned with the city staff and had streamlined a submission process that they had created. So rather than continue to offer that service hourly, which had this little built in like 20% margin, they provided it as a fixed fee, which was designed to provide a 50% margin while simultaneously appearing beneficial to the client as it was not open-ended and everybody knows the turmoils of getting permitting. It works. So this is the process you're going to walk out of here today, and I want you to start applying it tomorrow. You already know each piece of this now, but let's see how they fit together in actually what is a one continuous loop. Start with that value conversation, understand what is at stake before you discuss the scope, design fee options, create those 3 tiers that can be presented to the prospect, giving them the decision-making control based on the outcomes they want, but you are defining the conversations you have about that. Anchor confidently at the top tier, that, and it sounds counterintuitive for you, but when you present that properly, it will paint you as a trusted advisor. Give them that one-page proposal. It is a clear, focused, actionable document. And then I want you to track and improve. Learn from every proposal. Do the dry runs within your firm, with your partners, with your staff. Make sure you can talk confidently. It is a feedback loop. The more you practice it, the better you get at capturing value there. Okay, so in your next proposal, don't just default to your old model, please. Ask your client what is at stake, offer them those 3 options, frame your value. Just pick one of these and commit to it. Also, every conversation before the contract is signed and long after your client takes occupancy is a sales conversation. It is your opportunity to maintain your position as this trusted advisor. When you earn that status, your clients don't just accept your fee, they respect it. Without that respect, I assure you, and I've known from past poll questions I've given at this webinar, even after you sign your proposal, your client often will negotiate your invoices. They're going to request credits, nickel and dime you on things. They do that because they do not respect you as a trusted advisor. Now, in today's session, if it sparked something for you, if you're realizing your firm could be capturing more of the value that you already create, I just want you to know that you don't have to uh, do this all alone. This shift in pricing and positioning, it isn't easy, but I guarantee you it is possible. Firms that succeed, we had one last week talk about it. They actually have done this. It had a dramatic impact on them. You can have support while you make this happen. That's part of what I do. You can always reach out to me on my website. There's a way to reach me right there. We can continue the conversation. You can sign up for a free conversation with me there. I also want to thank the folks at BQE for inviting me here today. If you have not demoed Core yet, I see Rebecca launched the poll question. Please don't dismiss it. Say yes to this. I beg of you. You're going to see the difference. And the time that you spend looking at core will be well spent. I want you to do your homework. There's other software solutions out there. Even if you use a solution and you're all happy with it, spend a little time, look at what BQE Core can do for you. You will see what that difference is. You can leave that poll question. Rebecca, I know I've run long, 42 seconds beyond. If there's time for questions, I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions here.
Thank you so much, Steve. I think what we will do, which I've already posted in the chat because there's a few people like, hey, my question didn't get answered. If you would be willing to answer those offline again and we can send them out to all the attendees, that would be wonderful, just so we can be respectful of folks' time. And I think with that, I'll probably just have my closing comments mirroring all the thanks in the chat to both you and BQE. Again, if you've made it this far, we will submit your CE for you. We'll get the questions answered offline, and then we'll send you some resources afterwards.
Thank you
Awesome.
all.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Have a great day.
Bye bye.